The ultimate installment in a series of episodes is called the finale, but this is actually where the story begins in many ways. The story of the catastrophe is yet to be written, perhaps with many of us as co-authors in the process. While this is the final episode, the full movie compilation is coming later this year and will include updates and new material relevant to nearly every episode along the way. It is also the starting point of the current and foreseeable future genesis point of observation of the catastrophe, the Sun. If we could only see beneath to the interior of our star, her secrets might not be so well hidden. What lies beneath the plasma surface? What sort of currents and fields and cycle-driving activity might be found? What we know for certain is the current dynamo models are just best guess theories, and that there is nothing about a nuclear engine that should produce certain cycles we know to have excellent harmonics and synchronizations. These cycles, the reason for the dynamo theory, truly are a mystery. So is the lack of a solar bulge. The most ever detected was 10 kilometers, and the error range makes the entire measurement shy of certain. No physics allow for the spherical distribution on a spinning celestial mass. And so we investigate what we know, the cycles. While the solar dynamo proposed by the mainstream might be a nice fit for the 11-year cycle, the longer ones are hard to reconcile, and the shorter ones are impossible. Let's look at flare sequences to see what I mean. In this panel, we can see a two-peaked solar flare on the left. The double peak is what we're looking for in each of these eruptive flares afterwards, with 2 or even 3 peaks each. So when the first X-class flare erupted in that sequence, we might have guessed that it was going to have a companion event coming with it for a double flare and CME event. Let's do another one and make them harder as we go. Starting at the left side, we see a weird pair of flares, with the first one having a hunchback hump to it. That curving hump is key, because right after the hump and twin pair, we saw low-level pre-flare instability preceding a very large event, X10 plus solar flare. And then look right afterwards. Folks, that is a slightly different energy level, but same exact pattern of a hump on the left of a twin flare event. And what do we imagine happens thereafter? Pre-flare instability, another massive X-class solar flare. What do you think? Should we keep going? You'll need a bit more information than what's shown on this 3-day chart to catch the next one. On the 6-hour data, we were noticing that these small flares were interesting looking M-shaped curves on the 6-hour chart, and in fact, all of these small events preceding the bigger ones were actually little M-shaped curves, and so when 2 much larger and much more prominent M-shaped flare event curves occurred, we might have guessed that the follow-up would also be bigger in scale. Often one of the big events makes it harder to see the forest through the trees. We'll label the 3 instances of a pattern here: C2 solar flare, S for the smaller flaring events, and LD for long duration flare, shown by its wider shape and long endurance. That happened 3 times in a row. C2 solar flare, smaller flare events, followed by a longer duration flare that, with wide base as opposed to the impulsive flare spikes upward, which are much sharper, tend to produce the powerful CMEs, so that pattern would have been very good to know. Again, while they've invented a dynamo that explains and predicts the 11-year cycle, long patterns and short ones require a reconsideration of what is actually taking place inside that star, inside all stars, and how this relates to the catastrophe. In just the last year, we have seen incredible studies on surface models of the Sun's activity rather than being internally driven. We've seen studies detailing how electric currents either sustain or erupt the plasma filaments. We've looked back at Thomas Gold and the question of a solar chronometer. The studies have shown that our sun can superflare, and so do many other sun-like slow rotators. And of course, there is the evidence potentially pointing to a long-period solar event that all requires an explanation, all finding tension with the mainstream idea of a steady, quiet sun. In just the last 2 months, we've seen a continuation and refinement of models suggesting that there is all the energy needed in the photosphere, chromosphere, and corona to drive the solar cycle, a secret hiding in plain sight. We have seen evidence that the sun has magnetic fields much more powerful than what is mostly accessed for cycle flaring, suggesting we've never seen the sun go above 4th gear in modern times. This is confirmed by the revelation that coronal magnetic fields are 10 times stronger than they believed, which also delivers weight to the superficial models rather than internal dynamos. It is the concept that our star can go to another level with which we are concerned today, and we know that fifth gear does exist both inside and in the corona. And the most recent robust study suggests that our sun can have a superflare every 2,000 to 3,000 years, another cyclical pattern that is incompatible with a nuclear engine and modern dynamo models of the 11-year cycle. The sun does have a secret, but it's only partially well kept. While most secrets are selectively spread, this one is ubiquitously distributed, but in a code that is difficult to decipher. Most of modern science does not speak the language, but do you? Chan Thomas did. I have now reviewed 7 different copies of the more than 200-page 1993 version sent in by various keen observers out there among you, and in addition to comparison matching and ISBN verification, it is clear that this real book, after 40 years of studying the catastrophe, contains Chan Thomas finally landing on the sun, in an addendum which you can tell was to be an addition to the next edition had he lived to write another one, suggesting the cooling down in grand minimum, cooling too much at the surface, and then explosive reignition. Even still, and despite the bad outlook projections by the colleagues he trusted, the trend was real, is real. And if we are talking about a micronova and not a superflare, then I've already said the outermost layers must cool and crust, and then blast out in a reignition event. The PDFs of all the versions are being compiled by the Suspect Sky channel along with further discussion, and in that 1993 version you'll read much of what you've heard here already in the series. It's not just the provisions, but the preparation of the mind, the books, the learning, the skills, even down to natural childbirth. We all come from survivors. A large part of that survival will be luck at first, but while most of the lucky will be petrified, a few of the lucky will be prepared. Chan's magnetic null zone trigger hypothesis is exactly what I've concluded is the only repeatable electromagnetic galactic event that is predictably cyclic. The sun hits an electric field at the point of magnetic reversal of the galactic fields in the galactic sheet. And isn't it interesting that it is the same electric field produced by a powerful solar blast that can reverse the magnetization of the material known as Earth? The most certain elements of this entire 23-episode examination have been the repeated magnetic events on Earth coincident with major climatological changes and stress on the life of Earth. Whether originating in the galaxy or on the sun, the progenitor appears to be external to Earth and includes inundations of the sea and disruptions of the landmass. Survival can be had underground or above, and the stories of survival come from many latitudes and all continents. It is more than likely that plans are being made beneath ground, and the known subterranean tunnel and occupancy space in the United States alone is tens of millions of people, let alone the parts we don't know about. You have the unenviable task of preparing physically and mentally while not allowing your life to collapse around you due to the overwhelming totality of this reality. If you lose your cool and responsibility, and you lose your job, how do you live, let alone prep? If you lose your partner, your family, just grab your popcorn and enjoy the show and hope it happens fast. I'm hoping that we are better prepared than people before, and that the next event will be a moderate one like some of them, and not like the Younger Dryas, Last Champ event, or the Toba DNA bottleneck. And if so, this is the perfect chance for humans to skip the full reset step and come back faster and stronger than before. This is your chance to rewrite the future without the mistakes of the past. There is simply not just apocalypse and continued reality, but the disasters have a sliding scale, including circumstances that could leave us a mere century from recovery. And if it's a millennium, or 10, I am hoping that there are a few of you out there who think like I do, and I wish you the very best of both luck and preparation. Eyes open, no fear. Be safe, everyone.